right. Well, welcome everyone to the Cyber Wardens Foundations webinar. My name is Kimberly Roberts-Saleh. I'm the head of marketing and comms at Cyber Wardens, and I'm also your Cyber Wardens educator today. Today, we're going to have a look at the cyber risks that you might face as a practice or health practitioner, a practice owner, practice employee, medical professional, the types of red flags that we need to be able to identify online to let us know that we might be the target of a cybercrime. And we're going to have a look at simple strategies to boost your cyber safety within your health practice. First, I want to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which I'm presenting from today. That would be the Ngunnawal and the Ngambri people, sorry, and from which you're joining this webinar. I recognize their continuing connection to lands, waters, and communities, and pay respect to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander cultures and to elders past and present. So let's dive right in. We've got a lot to cover today, and I want to make sure that we have time at the end for Q&A as well. So let's talk about what Cyber Wardens is to start with and what CyberAid is. So CyberAid is a health industry-specific program for delivered by Cyber Wardens for anyone in the healthcare sector or healthcare industry. The Cyber Wardens program itself is an initiative of the Council of Small Business Organizations of Australia, and it is funded by the Australian government. So it's a free program that's been designed for small businesses, and with this we include small medical practices and sole traders or contractors within the healthcare industry. And it's a free program that's been designed for those small businesses to be able to gain quick tips, practical strategies that they can apply in their business to make sure that they're cyber safe. So at its core, Cyber Wardens is a very accessible program. So it's been developed in a language that doesn't require any tech background. It's jargon-free, and it's really developed to be able to be relatable for anyone at any stage in their cybersecurity journey to be able to grab those quick strategies they can apply to their business. So what's really important to remember with Cyber Wardens, and we're going to talk about this over the webinar as well, is that anyone on your team can be a Cyber Warden. It doesn't need to be the one person. In fact, we recommend that more people or everyone on your team, where possible, become a Cyber Warden to be able to help. We want to make sure that our teams are equipped with the knowledge that they need to be able to identify cybercrime, to be able to prevent cybercrime, and also to be able to discuss cyber safety within your team and make sure that that's a discussion that's ongoing within your practice or within your team. So on the agenda today, we're going to have a look at the biggest healthcare cybersecurity risks. There's 4 types of crimes that are especially prevalent within the healthcare industry. Then we're going to have a look at the red flags that we need to be able to identify to know that we might be the victim of a cybercrime. We're going to talk about why cyber safety is a team sport. And we're going to have a look at the risky habits that we have online and how to break them to make sure that we are less vulnerable to cybercrime. And then at the end of the webinar, you will become a Cyber Warden. So you'll receive your Cyber Warden's email, your Cyber Warden certificate, via email. And you'll be able to expand your knowledge with our further courses on our website. You'll also become part of the Cyber Wardens community, which means that you'll receive our news and our updates and our Cyber Wardens teams updates. And also Cyber Wardens is accredited by the Australian Institute of CPD standards. So anyone who is under that Institute of CPD standards, you are able to self-report CyberAid as a CPD hour for educational activity. I also want to point out that at the end of the webinar, there will be question time. So if you have any questions, you can pop them in the chat or in the Q&A as you go. And I'll have a look at the questions at the end and answer them as answer them live. So first, let's take a step back before we dive into the content, and let's have a look at cybersecurity within the small business landscape overall. So we surveyed a range of small business owners and employees about a year ago, and we asked them what they thought the biggest threats were to their businesses. Not surprisingly, energy prices and the cost of staff were right up there as the top concerns for small businesses. But you can see that cybersecurity threats were a very close third, with just over half of small businesses letting us know that cybersecurity concerns are high on their list of potential threats. When we have a look at the list here, you can see that most of the threats that are listed are actually all out of our control. So we can't control the weather, we can't control the pandemics. And I mean, the weather is very timely at the moment with people in northern New South Wales and Queensland about to be hit by a cyclone. So if any of you are in that region, I hope you stay safe. And pandemics, of course, we've lived through that recently, so that's not something that we could control. We can't control energy prices, the cost of staff. But the one thing that we can control is our resilience to cyber threats. And that's where Cyber Wardens and Cyber Aid comes in. So before we start, I want to test your knowledge. So I've got a few quizzes that will pop up on the screen. It's not pass or fail. It's just a fun way to help you position yourself on the cyber security awareness scale. And you might know more than you think. So you might be pleasantly surprised with your responses. So I've got a few questions that will pop up. The first one is, how many cyber attacks do you think are reported every day? So we've got 38, 121, or 240. So I'll leave the question up for a few seconds to give everybody the chance to respond. And all will be revealed soon. So we've got 240 in the lead for now. Let's see what the answer is. So 240 is indeed the correct answer. So 240, that means that that's just the tip of the iceberg when we think of all the other cyber attacks that are reported daily. That also means that every 6 minutes an attack is reported. So by the end of this webinar, there will have been 7, 8, 9 potential attacks that will have been reported. And that's just really brings home the point that even though that's just the tip of the iceberg, they're happening all the time. And cyber criminals are becoming more and more sophisticated, and it's becoming harder and harder to identify cybercrime, which is why we've got this program. So yeah, 240 is really just the tip of the iceberg. A lot of cyber attacks, unfortunately, go unreported still, and that's why it's really important to report if you are the victim of a cybercrime or a data breach, to enable those cybersecurity centers within government to be able to report accurately and to be able to develop policies and programs for small businesses and healthcare practitioners to stay safer online. The next one is, how much cybercrime do you think targets small businesses? So we've got 16%, 43%, or 67%. So we've got 67 in the lead. Give you a few more seconds for everyone to get their answers in. And I'll reveal the answer. So we're looking at actually 43%. So that's nearly half of all cybercrime that targets small businesses. Anyone who answers 67%, you're on the right track. It's encouraging to see that you are thinking about the fact that cybercrime does target quite a lot of small businesses, because what we found in our research is that a lot of small businesses or small health practices don't think that they are attractive to cyber criminals. They think that they're too small to be a target. So we're used to seeing the bigger organizations in the media, and we're used to hearing about, Medibank, Medisecure, Genea, all of those big corporations. We're used to hearing those in the media, so that creates that creates a fallacy in the sense that it's a fake sense of security for small businesses, thinking that they're safe. One of the reasons why small businesses are actually quite attractive to cyber criminals is that by being smaller, you don't necessarily have the cybersecurity infrastructure that those bigger organizations have. You might not have the same IT capabilities. And of course, as a smaller practice, a smaller business, you are also wearing many hats. You have limited resources. And all of those factors combine to make you very attractive to cyber criminals to try to target you. The next question is, how much do you think a cyber attack costs on average? So we've got 9,500, 49,600, or 57,300. So we've got 49,600 in the lead. I'll leave it up for a few more minutes. Sorry, seconds. All right, let me reveal the answer. So we are indeed looking at 49,600. So well done, anyone who answered that question. That is nearly $50,000. That's the average cost of a cyber attack. First of all, it's risen from 9,000 in 3 years. So it's risen almost fivefold. But also it's the average cost, so it could be a lot higher. What's really important to remember here is that not only is that a financial impact that could potentially decimate your business, but it's also an amount that, I don't know about you, but I can think of a million other things that I could do with that $50,000 that doesn't involve cyber criminals getting their hands on it. So you could lose that money to cyber criminals, but you could also be liable for the original amount to a supplier that you are still owing to that supplier. So it could be a double-edged sword in that regard. And then the last question is, how many attacks do you think are caused by human error? So we've got 95%, 54%, and 23%. All right, let me reveal the answer. The answer is 95%. That is 19 in 20 cyber attacks caused by human error. That's a huge amount. And that's really, it's a stark reminder that we might be tempted to think that because cybersecurity is a technology issue, the cyber attacks are caused by tech failure or device failure. But really, it's our own human behavior that makes us the most vulnerable to cybercrime. So cybersecurity at its core isn't a tech issue, it's actually a human behavior issue. And this is why this course is really focused on providing you with the tips that you can apply throughout your business and the knowledge where you can recognize those cyber attacks, because 19 times out of 20, the cyber attack is caused by either yourselves or someone on your team. Let's talk about cybercrime within the health sector. So the healthcare system specifically is a prime target for cyber attacks because you hold very valuable patient data within your systems. You hold, most businesses will hold name, email address, financial information, but the healthcare industry also holds medical records, diagnoses, medication, Medicare records. So that valuable information is really attractive to cyber criminals because they can sell it on the dark web. They can use it they can hold your ransom, and they can potentially launch a range of other cyber attacks with the information that they hold. So not only do cyber attacks cause financial losses to the healthcare sector, but they can also disrupt healthcare services and really compromise patient safety. So we're not just looking at a financial loss here, but we're looking at actually a threat to potentially patient lives in some instances. So that's why we've created CyberAid to really tailor it to the healthcare sector, because within the healthcare system, there are definitely some crimes, some cyber crimes that make it a lot more attractive to cyber criminals. So let's have a look at a few stats. So as I mentioned, healthcare is the #1 target for cybercrime in Australia. Those stats come from the Office of the Australian Information Commissioner. And that means that 1 in 5 data breaches in Australia come from the healthcare industry, which is why it is the #1 target. So just about 20% of all data breaches in Australia are sourced from or come from the healthcare industry. So that's quite huge when we think of all the other industries that are in play within the small business community. And also what's really important to know is that 82% of Australians fear unauthorized access to their health records. So that means that quite a lot of your patients do worry about what happens to their health records and how they are stored within your practices and whether or not they are safe within your systems. And worryingly, in 2024, we saw that 88% of healthcare professionals opened phishing emails. So that just goes to show that it's not necessarily something that's still recognized in terms of a red flag that people are able to identify. And that's where CyberAid comes in. We're going to talk about phishing emails in a few slides to really drive the point home of what they are, but also how to recognize them. So cyber attacks in healthcare, like I mentioned before, they of course have financial implications, but they can have much further reaching implications as well. They can breach patient privacy, of course, through the theft of patient data, but they can also compromise medical devices, devices that run on remote devices or that run on Wi-Fi or that are connected to apps and that are connected to technology. So that's why it's really important to really have that CyberAid content for the healthcare industry, because you are definitely a more vulnerable industry than other industries within Australia. So let's have a look at a few recent examples. I'm sure you've all heard of the Genea data breach that happened in mid-February. Genea is an IVF provider, and they suffered a cyber attack by the ransomware group called Termite. And the ransomware group was able to, or the cyber criminals were able to steal patient data, including first names, last names, financial information, but also medical records, and appointment details and diagnosis records. So it's really, our patients as health practitioners are already in a vulnerable state. And so adding the worry of having those cyber breaches happen to them is can really play on their mind and make them more reluctant to reach out to health practices. Another one that happened recently was the Heart Center cyber attack in January 2025. Again, that was another ransomware attack, which we'll have a look at what ransomware is in the next slide. And the MediSecure data breach that happened in May of last year. So MediSecure is an electronic prescription provider. And again, that was a ransomware attack where the cyber criminals essentially held the data ransom until the corporation or the organization paid to get the data released. I've got another one here, Hot Doc alleged scam. I'm putting that one here because it's not actually a scam, but it's just to make you aware of the software that you use within your practices and what it looks like when your patients receive it. So this is an example of a legitimate request from Hot Doc to add credit card details to complete a request to book an appointment. The person here, they were actually that raised concerns and that raised red flags for them. So they actually called the GP practice to double check whether this was a legitimate request. And the GP practice, they weren't able to answer them. So the person who answered the phone, they weren't able to say whether yes or no this was a legitimate request. So it just kind of goes to show that it's really important for everyone across the team to know what kind of software you're using, what they look like for your patients, and the main questions that will come up from patients when you use those types of software. Let's have a look at the most common types of cybercrimes within the healthcare industry. So there's four. The first one is ransomware, as I mentioned before. So ransomware is when a cyber attack basically encrypts your organization's data, essentially holding it hostage. So they'll basically ask you to pay a certain amount to release the data. and until you pay, they will keep holding it hostage. So the ramifications for this are quite far-reaching. It can lead to delays in treatments, appointment cancellations, and it can also endanger patient lives. So if any of the life-saving equipment that is used in hospitals or in practices, in medical practices, are disrupted through ransomware and are not able to provide the care that they would to keep a patient alive, that can go as far as endangering patient lives. So ransomware, because of the type of information that you hold as health practitioners, ransomware is definitely the most common cybercrime for the healthcare industry. The next one is business email compromise, or what we also call inbox break-ins, and that's where cyber criminals will essentially access your inbox and from there launch a range of secondary attacks. Business email compromise is at the source of multiple other attacks. So I'm going to spend a bit more time on that specific one in the next slide. Malware is essentially it's a virus. So you will all be aware of diseases and viruses and what they can do. So this is essentially a virus on your device. So once you open an attachment that contains malware, that's where your device becomes basically it halts, and the cyber criminals are able to access data through the encrypted malware that they've installed on your device. And then the last one is compromised systems. So within the healthcare industry, we do rely quite heavily on remote access solutions for telehealth and healthcare services, along with medical devices that are now electronic. Also the linkage from medical devices to health apps. So all of those different systems that we use within the healthcare industry, those are all essentially entry points for cyber criminals to breach through the systems and to compromise your system. So again, often that's because of weak passwords or because of weak authentication protocols. So we're going to have a look at how we make sure that we protect our systems, but that's definitely one that is very prevalent within the healthcare industry. I talked about the inbox break-in being at the source of secondary attacks, so let's have a look at what that looks like. If you think of everything that you hold in your inbox, whether it's your practice inbox, your admin inbox, or your own individual inbox, you would agree with me, I'm sure, that you've got a treasure trove of information in there. So you've got personal information, you've got employee information, you probably have some passwords and logins, you might have bank account details, you certainly would have patient information, business data in there, and invoices as well from either your suppliers or invoices that you would have sent to your patients. So all of that information, once a cyber criminal is in your inbox, they're able to use that information to launch secondary attacks. So they can impersonate you to your employees or to your patients. They can send fake invoices on your behalf to patients, or they can send invoices on behalf of your suppliers to yourself. So that's called fake invoices, and that's when they essentially recreate a legitimate invoice, same branding, same formatting, but they'll change the banking details, making you think that you're paying your legitimate supplier, for example, a medical supplies supplier, where really you're paying the cyber criminal. They'll also search for your passwords and logins, and then they'll reuse those passwords across multiple different accounts until they hit the jackpot on one or more accounts. So that's why it's really important that our password hygiene is very strong. And we will have a look at how we do that. So how do we protect our accounts? And not just our inbox, but all the other accounts that we use, the systems that we use in terms of medical devices, or in terms of all the software, appointment software, medical software that you use within your practice. We want to make sure that we protect all of those accounts. So we want to make sure that we have long, strong, and unique passwords on all of our accounts. And if there's one thing that I really want you to take away from this webinar is the upgrade to your passwords once we finish the webinar. So we want to look at a minimum of 14 random characters. So that's a mix of uppercase, lowercase, numbers, characters, symbols. And a string of characters that are nearly impossible to put together. So we want them to be random. And then we add multi-factor authentication on that account or on all of our accounts, ideally. Multi-factor authentication is that second layer of verification that you might receive through a text message. I'm sure everybody here is aware of what MFA is, but it's really important that we add that second layer. So if you think of your password as the key to your medical practice, your multi-factor authentication is the virtual alarm system that you're putting onto your practice to make it virtually impossible for cyber criminals to break in. Now that we've got a good grasp of the types of crimes that are potentially within our midst in the healthcare industry, let's have a look at the red flags that we need to be able to identify and that will tell us that we might be the target of a cybercrime and that will help us stop it in its tracks. So the first one is unexpected invoices. So I mentioned the fake invoices before. What cybercriminals will do is that they'll send you an invoice often at a time where it's really busy. So you might have, depending on the type of healthcare that you provide, you might have peak seasons or peak periods for your practice. End of financial year is always a big one as well. And so they'll use those peak periods to send you unexpected invoices in the hopes that you don't really look at the detail and you just pay it, you batch process it. The next one is uncommon or misspelled email addresses. So if you have a look at the email here, you can see that there's an extra S. If you are very busy, you don't really pay attention to the detail because you've got a million other things going. You might miss that detail. You'll see the invoice, you'll pay the invoice, or you'll click on a link, or you'll transfer money. You'll essentially action the request thinking that you're doing it from the legitimate sender and not from a fake sender. The next one is the change of banking details for a usual supplier. So that's a huge red flag that goes hand in hand with the unexpected invoices. And that's where cyber criminals will essentially replicate, like I said before, those fake invoices. They'll replicate an invoice from a supplier, from medical supplies, for example. And it'll be same branding, same formatting, but they'll change the banking details so that you're paying them rather than paying your supplier. It's really important when you get an invoice where you're prompted to update your banking details for a usual supplier. It's really important for you to double check with your supplier before you pay anything. And we want to make sure that we double check with our supplier, not through the phone number that's on the invoice, but through a phone number that we source independently. So you go on their website, you find their phone number, or if you have it saved within your systems, you can call it from there, but we don't want to use the phone number that's on the invoice because they might have changed that phone number as well in line with the change of banking details. The next two are the pressure to act urgently coupled with unusual requests. So often those will come with from a person in a position of authority, which will make you want to act on the request quicker. So you can see here that's coming from the CEO. She's asking her team member her help on something. Don't tell the rest of the team, do it now. It's usually very vague, very generic, and often it's not really in line with the character or the way that the person writes. So anytime an email feels off because it's not on brand for the person sending it or because it sounds really out of character, that's a good indication to trust your gut and to not action anything in the email, but to check with the sender before you do anything. This one, the unusual or hidden links. So that's the phishing scams that I was talking about before. So a phishing scam is essentially when you click on a link, such as this one, thinking that you're clicking on a legitimate link, it'll take you to a login page where you'll be prompted to enter your login details. So for example, this one here is a Facebook example. There's been a lot with MyGov. We've heard of all the MyGov, Medicare, ATO scams as well. You basically are prompted to enter your login details to get into your account. Once you enter those login details, the cyber criminals have access to those login details. They'll be able to intercept them. And you are not, in fact, logging into your account, but you are providing them with your login details, which they can use, again, across multiple accounts if you're reusing your passwords on multiple accounts within your range of accounts. And then the last one is suspicious attachments on emails or social media messages. That's an especially important one for the healthcare industry because, as we saw Ransomware and malware are two of the top cyber crimes that target the healthcare industry, and often they will come in the form of an attachment. So if we see an attachment that doesn't look like a photo, here RAR is not, as we know, a photo file. A photo file would be a JPEG or a PNG. RAR is ransomware. So you might think that if a patient wants to send you a photo of an injury or a rash or anything where they want to show you something, we want to make sure that the file is indeed a photo file, so a JPEG or a PNG, and we don't open any attachments that look like they have a dodgy file type. Now that we can identify the red flags that we need to be aware of, let's talk about building that culture of cyber safety within our team. As I mentioned before, 95% of cyber attacks are due to human error, which means that we are, as humans, our own biggest vulnerability within our team. So us and our team members are the biggest vulnerability within the team. So why is that, and what does that look like? First reason is the lack of training. So traditionally, cybersecurity training is very expensive. It's very comprehensive. It can be very complex. It's usually part of a larger degree or a more comprehensive degree. And there hasn't really been any options for quick, simple, and actionable cybersecurity training. So that's where Cyber Wardens comes in. And it's really our goal is really to empower small businesses and health practices to gain the basic knowledge that they need to stay safe online. The next one is human error. So that can look like clicking on a phishing link, opening that attachment that we talked about, sharing your passwords. There's a range of other habits that we have online that we'll look at in the next slide that make us more vulnerable to cybercrime. Another one is working off-site. So that might be relevant, not necessarily to all of you, depending if you're working in a practice or not. But if you're working off-site, you're at a cafe, you're checking your emails, you're checking a patient file, you're in the airport, anything that's on your laptop, we don't even realize when we're off-site because we think that we're in our own little bubble. But anything that's on your laptop, anyone can see it. If you're typing in a password on your laptop, anyone can see that. So without being paranoid, it's really important to have a good awareness of our surroundings when we're working off-site. And ideally as well, we want to make sure that we sign into Wi-Fi on a private network. So that can be a VPN, a virtual protected network, a virtual private network, sorry. And it can be on your phone's hotspot or if there's a private network within your range. But we want to avoid logging into public Wi-Fi. Another one is being busy and missing details. So as I mentioned, we are all very busy and it's very normal for us to miss the tiny details. And that's what cyber criminals will bank on. And that's why it's really important, even though it does take a bit more time, to just pay attention to those email addresses, to those links that look a bit weird, and really always to trust our gut if there's anything that doesn't look right. And then the last one is preying on emotion. So a lot of cyber criminals, they know that we're all humans. They'll prey on our human emotions. So a lot of those scams will attack the core of our human emotions as human beings. So they will pretend that they're distressed. It'll come from your boss. It'll come from your son, your daughter, your parents. They really know how to social engineer their attacks so that they know how to reach us personally and how to make us act. So again, really important to keep our wits about us when we receive anything that sounds overly dramatic. I mentioned that we have some cyber habits that we need to be avoiding when we are operating online. I will put my hand up to admit that I have done all of those at some point in my life. And I'm sure that if I asked for a show of hands now, many of you would also admit to doing some of those habits. Now, I'm not saying this to shame anyone. I'm saying this to kind of give us an awareness and to make us aware of the habits that we have that we think are probably innocuous, that we don't necessarily think about twice, but that make us more vulnerable to cybercrime. So it's really important to make sure that we are aware of those habits and that we know how to break them. So the first one is snoozing a software update. Now, you might be really busy. You're in a Zoom call, you're in a telehealth call, you're filling out patient details, and the software update pops up and you snooze it because you don't have time to action it because you know it'll turn off your computer and take you out of action for a few minutes. The more we do that, the less our devices are equipped with the essential software updates that they need to stay safe and to apply those latest security patches. So the easiest way for software updates is to add automated software updates to your devices so that they can do it at a time that doesn't bother you and doesn't interrupt your workflow. The next one is putting your laptop in sleep mode. So if you are like me, at the end of the day, you might decide to just close the lid on your laptop because you're done with the day. But you don't want to shut down your laptop because all the tabs that you were working on will be there the next time you open it. Unfortunately, when you put your laptop in sleep mode rather than shutting it down, again, those software updates cannot be actioned or implemented on your device. So it's really important to shut it down at the end of each day. I'm paying for one software license and sharing logins. So I get it. A lot of the work that we do requires different software. Software licenses are expensive. They also usually charge per seat. So the more software licenses you add onto an account, the more you have to pay for. So I might be tempted to share that across the team. But when we do that, we're exposing more people than necessary to the access that the software provides you. Some of those people might not necessarily need all the admin rights within that login, and you might be exposing team members to information that they don't need for their job, and that that exposes that information and puts it at risk. So it's really important to only provide logins to people who need it and to pay for separate licenses for everybody who needs the license. It's a good way to do an audit as well and to really understand within your team who needs those specific logins and admin rights. The next three are password hygiene. So it's back to what we were talking about before. We want to avoid reusing passwords or short passwords or also recognizable passwords. So of course, password 123 is out, but even stuff like your pet's name, your business name, your favorite footy team, all of those things that might make you that you might post on social media about, or that a lot of people might know about. Cyber criminals, again, with that social engineering, they'll troll through a range of different social media channels to paint a picture of yourself. And from there, they'll be able to potentially decipher a password if you're using your pet's name and you just posted about Coco's latest birthday, or you just posted about your footy team winning the grand final. So it's really important that we look at long, strong, and unique passwords like we mentioned before. And then those passwords, we want to store them on a password manager. So that's an encrypted piece of software where those passwords are saved in the cloud. So we want to avoid password spreadsheets or a notes app on your phone, or worse, a post-it on your desktop. Again, I've done all of those, so no shame to anyone doing them, but this is just a good reminder to stop right away and to install a proper password manager. What's good with the password managers as well is that they'll generate those passwords for you, so you don't have to think of all those random strings of characters, and they'll store the password right away so that when you go to log into an account, that will be stored in the password manager. They often have plugins that you can install on your browser, whereas you'll be able to just access the account by virtue of being logged into your password manager. And then you only have to remember one password, which is your master password, rather than all of your different passwords. General casual staff login kind of goes with the software license and sharing logins. Again, everybody on your team should have their own individual login. Not only does that allow everyone to have the access to the information that they need and not necessarily additional access that they don't require, but it also means that if there is a cyber breach or a cyber incident, we're able to pinpoint from what account it came from if we're using individual logins rather than just one generic one. And then the last one is a bit of an outlier, but it's a really important one and one that we might not think about. Adding personal details to our out-of-office messages, when we do that, we are painting a picture to anyone who reads that email as to our whereabouts, and it makes it easier to impersonate us. So let's say you're going to a conference for medical professionals next week in Melbourne from those dates. Anyone who intercepts that email is able to then impersonate you to your team members, to your patients, and request either money or request them for clicking on a link. by impersonating you, because they are able to add those details to make it sound legitimate. So with out-of-office messages, we want to make sure that we stay quite vague, and we just put our dates that we're away and when we'll be back. And we keep it quite generic, because the more we provide information, and with the rise of AI as well, cyber criminals are able to scrape all of that and put a very convincing case in front of someone that they are speaking to you when they are not. Now, we, of course, this webinar focuses on how to protect against cybercrime and how to make sure that we don't become the victim of a data breach or a cybersecurity incident. But as we saw before, it is quite prevalent. It's not going anywhere. It's something that cyber criminals are becoming more sophisticated every day. So it can happen, unfortunately, that we are the victim of a cybercrime or a data breach. And what's really important to remember in those cases is that, first of all, it's nothing to be ashamed of. It's actually quite prevalent, as we saw before. And it's really important to act as soon as possible when that happens. So we want to report a data breach as soon as possible. I've put in here on the screen, you've got a range of different institutions, government departments, where you can reach out to if you are the victim of a cybercrime. The main one is ScamWatch. So ScamWatch is a good one to go to right away. Some of the other ones that I've put down depend on the nature of the cybercrime. But another one as well, if you want to talk to someone, is the Australian Signals Directorate. They have a hotline, 1300 Cyber 1, that you can call, and from there you can report a cybercrime. So I want to remind you all that CyberAid is accredited by the Australian Institute of CPD standards. So before I declare you a Cyber Warden, I just want to let you know that this is accredited by the AIcpdS body, which means that if you are if you're able to report CPD points through your CPD home, depending on what peak body you are a member of, you can report a CyberAid as an AIcpdS accredited educational activity. So on that note, congratulations. I'm excited to declare you a Cyber Warden, but most importantly, I'm here to congratulate you on taking the first step in your cybersecurity journey for your health practice and for prioritizing cybersecurity, not only for the health of your practice, but for the privacy of your employees and of your patients. So well done. You will receive a certificate in the next 24 hours that you'll be able to use to upload to your CPD home for CPD credits, and that should come through email. So just before we go, I just want to leave you with a few resources that you can consult. So our friends at the Australian Digital Health Agency have a range of online resources. You might be familiar with them already. And they also have some podcasts that you can listen to if you are more of an audio type of person. So you can scan those QR codes here. You can also just go to the Australian Digital Health Agencies and look for their online resources on their website. And we also have a range of resources that we have on our website, including blog posts, videos, how-to guides, and other resources that you can download. So you can certainly have a look at our website. We've also created this certificate that you can print and showcase in your practice to let your patients know that you are CyberAid certified and that you have someone on your team who's a Cyber Warden on duty. So if you wanted one of those certificates, please let us know, and we will be able to send them to you via email. So you can contact us on hello@cyberwardens.com.au. And you can access all the other resources on our website as well through this QR code. I just want to remind you to share this course with your whole network within the healthcare industry. It's really important for Australian patients to feel protected when they go and see their healthcare practitioners. So it's really important that everybody is empowered with the knowledge that we shared today. So please share this across your network. Thank you all for joining me. And thank you so much again for taking the time to do the training. You will be receiving your certificate shortly. And well done again for prioritizing cybersecurity within your health practice.